My name is Alex. I was 16 years old, and the night my world cracked open started with one sentence. My mom told me to get out. She said, "You'll be back begging in a month." My dad didn't argue. He just stood there, arms crossed, while the front door slammed so hard the walls shook. I stepped onto the porch with a backpack digging into my shoulders and the taste of metal in my mouth. I didn't look back. I couldn't. But 11 years later, my phone lit up on a quiet Tuesday night. 99 missed calls. Same number, same people. They were the ones begging now. Back then, I was just a kid with paint under my nails and stupid hope lodged in my chest. I'd been accepted into a private design program across the city, the kind of school you only see in glossy brochures or TikTok tours narrated by kids with perfect lives. I ran home gripping that acceptance email like it was proof that I wasn't a disappointment. I thought, finally, they'll see me. Instead, my mom skimmed the screen and scoffed. Art? You think doodling for strangers is a career? She laughed like I'd told a bad joke. Then she shut my laptop and slid it away like it was garbage. My dad stepped closer, pointing at the sketchbook stacked on my desk, years of late nights and cracked fingers. "You follow the plan," he said. "Pre-med, business, something real. Or you're on your own. No house, no help, no family. Choose." My face burned. My hands shook so badly I clenched them into fists behind my back. Every instinct told me to apologize, to fold, to survive. But something broke instead. "Then I'm on my own," I said, hearing my voice sound braver than I felt. My dad's eyes went cold. "Fine, pack your stuff. You'll be back begging in a month." He opened the door and didn't wait. I walked into the night with one backpack, a sketchbook pressed to my chest, and the sound of my childhood snapping shut behind me. I swore I'd rather sleep hungry than crawl back. I had no idea that years later, the begging would come from them. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far the story goes. I'm Alex, 16, standing on a cracked sidewalk, and the only thing I own that feels like a future is the dream they tried to tear apart. That moment was the start of everything I lost, everything I built, and everything they never expected coming. That first night after the door slammed, I slept on a friend's couch that smelled like old laundry detergent and burnt popcorn. The blanket was thin, the pillow lumpy, but none of that mattered because my brain wouldn't shut up. It wasn't replaying the fight or the look on my dad's face. It was stuck on an image that wouldn't leave me alone. In my head, I kept seeing a kid standing in front of a locked door, hands full of something fragile, while two tall shadows loomed behind her, tearing it apart piece by piece. I didn't have words for it yet, but the picture felt loud, like it was demanding to exist. A week later, I walked onto campus running on caffeine, adrenaline, and panic. I was officially enrolled, technically homeless, and one bad day away from losing everything. The buildings looked unreal, all clean lines and glass, like something out of a movie I didn't belong in. Inside the studios, the air was thick with paint, chemicals, and noise. People argued about colors and angles like it actually mattered. And for the first time in my life, no one laughed when I said what I wanted to do. No one told me to grow up. That alone felt dangerous, like hope sneaking back in when I wasn't looking. I scrapped together every dollar I had, paid for a tiny shared room near campus, and grabbed shifts wherever I could. A greasy late-night diner hired me without asking questions. During the day, I painted until my wrists ached and my fingers cramped. At night, I wiped tables, refilled coffee, and pretended my feet weren't on fire. I'd stumble back to my room at 2 or 3 in the morning, collapse, and do it all again. I was exhausted in a way that went deeper than sleep, but it still beat choking in that house waiting for permission to breathe. The first person who treated me like a real human was a guy in my foundations class. Messy hair, paint permanently under his nails, always looked like he'd slept on a studio floor. He studied my first assignment, a rough sketch of two faceless adults towering over a smaller figure, and let out a low whistle. "There's anger in this," he said. "Real anger. Don't soften it." I shrugged it off at the time, but that sentence planted something in me. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment my work stopped trying to be pretty. That same week, I woke up shaking from a nightmare. In it, my mom stood over a fireplace, feeding my paintings into the flames one by one. She smiled while the colors curled and burned, like she was finally winning something. I didn't calm down. I grabbed my sketchbook and drew the scene exactly as I remembered it, hands reaching into fire, her face twisted with satisfaction. The next day, I painted it. Every stroke felt like ripping something out of my chest that I'd been swallowing for years. People noticed. Professors slowed down when they passed it. Students whispered. Someone asked, "Who did this to you?" I smiled and said nothing. Money, though, was still a mess. My parents had cut me off completely. No calls, no texts, just silence. When tuition for the next term came up, I went to the financial aid office expecting a lecture and walked out dizzy instead. My scholarship application had been withdrawn, not denied, withdrawn. Later, a clerk quietly told me someone had called pretending to be me and said I'd decided to quit art. There were only two people who'd benefit from that. If they thought that would drag me back home, they were dead wrong. I worked more. I sold sketches on the street. I painted until my vision blurred. At 3 a.m, alone in that tiny room, one question kept circling my head like a threat. Would you still choose yourself if it meant being alone every night? I didn't have the answer yet. I just knew I wasn't going back. By the time the midterm exhibition rolled around, my anger had stopped spilling everywhere and started taking shape. I wasn't just painting anymore. I was building something. 3 large canvases took over my side of the studio, leaning against the wall like they were waiting their turn to speak. The first showed a kid offering a glowing piece of art to 2 shadowed adults. The second showed those same hands tearing it in half. The third showed the kid walking away, clutching the ripped pieces to their chest like armor. My mentor stood in front of them for a long time without saying a word. Then she nodded. "Submit them as a set," she said. "People need to see the whole story. It's ugly, it's honest. That's what makes it real." The night of the show, the gallery buzzed with cheap wine, forced laughter, and the sharp click of shoes on polished concrete. I stood near my work pretending to scroll on my phone, watching every reaction like my life depended on it. Some people stared without blinking. Others leaned in close, reading the small title card I'd taped to the wall. A guy I recognized from another class nodded toward the shadowed figures. "Who are they?" he asked casually. "My parents," I said. He laughed, thinking I was joking. I didn't correct him. As the room filled up, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. I silenced it and forced myself to breathe. That was when the air shifted. Not silence, tension, like something pulling tight. I looked toward the entrance and felt my stomach drop. My mother stood in the doorway, dressed like she was heading to a corporate dinner, eyes scanning the room with that same familiar mix of judgment and calculation. For a split second, I wondered if exhaustion had finally broken my brain. Then her gaze locked onto my paintings. She walked toward me slowly, deliberately. The crowd parted without knowing why. "What is this?" she hissed when she reached the wall. "Is this how you see us? As monsters?" Heat rushed up my neck, but I didn't look away. "If the shoe fits," I said. Her jaw tightened. She raised a hand toward the canvas, fingers curling like she might tear it down. For a heartbeat, I was back in our living room watching my dad snap my sketchbook in half while she stood there saying, "You'll thank us someday." "Don't," I said, my voice steady even though my pulse was screaming. Touching the art breaks gallery rules. People were watching now. Whispers spread. My mom noticed the audience and pasted on a brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So this is what you've been doing, airing family drama for strangers. You're embarrassing us." "You embarrassed yourselves," I replied quietly. "I'm just documenting it." Before she could fire back, my classmate with the messy hair stepped in. "You don't get to threaten the work," he said calmly. "This is one of the strongest pieces here." Someone nearby muttered, "She's incredible," just loud enough for my mom to hear. Her face flushed. She straightened up, sneered, and walked out. The door closing behind her sounded way too much like the night I was kicked out. After she left, something unexpected happened. People gathered around my paintings, buzzing about what they'd just seen. A local blogger asked if he could feature the series. Then another invitation came in. Then another. The humiliation she'd tried to dump on me slid right off and landed back on her. When they announced awards later that night and I heard my name for Most Impactful Series, a question rang louder than the applause. When the people who are supposed to love you turn their backs on you, do you forgive them or let success hit back? Life didn't suddenly get easy. The prize money barely covered rent. My parents escalated in quieter ways. Emails accusing me of ruining the family name. Relatives calling to say I ran away, that I was unstable, that bad influences had warped me. One aunt even left a voice message calling my art demonic. I laughed so I wouldn't cry. Then one night, walking home from a late shift, a police car pulled up beside me. A missing person report, filed by my parents. At the station, I signed papers proving I was safe, enrolled, working. "Some parents don't know when to let go," the officer said softly. Walking back into the night, hands shaking, one thought burned clear. If they wanted a war, I'd make sure every move left evidence.
That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed with a cheap desk lamp buzzing overhead and opened a battered notebook I'd been dragging around since I left home. It wasn't a diary. It was messier than that. Half-finished sketches, angry notes, dates scribbled in the margins. I started writing like I was testifying to someone who didn't exist yet. Every threat, every manipulation, every time my parents tried to corner me into giving up my life so theirs could stay neat. I taped in old photos, too. My dad dumping my art supplies in the trash, my mom tearing up a drawing she found under my pillow. I didn't know why I was doing it. I just knew it felt like building a record they couldn't rewrite later. A few weeks after the police incident, a flyer appeared on the campus board. Regional competition. Theme: Truth and Consequences. Sponsored by a major gallery. The winner would get a serious grant and exposure to collectors who actually mattered. The words hit me hard. Truth and consequences. They echoed in my head all day, like a dare. I knew exactly what truth I wanted to put on a wall. And I knew the consequences would be ugly. I designed a piece that scared me. A massive family portrait, warped and towering. The parents' faces were detailed enough to be recognizable, but cracked down the middle like shattered porcelain. Behind them weren't cozy rooms or smiling memories, but a courtroom, a hospital corridor, a house with foreclosure signs nailed into the yard, futures they'd never imagined for themselves. The child in the painting wasn't begging or crying. She was turning her back, walking toward a blank canvas glowing like an exit. I painted until my fingers went numb. During breaks, I reread my notebook, letting the memories sting just enough to keep the work honest. One evening, my phone lit up with my mother's name. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Do you know what you caused with the police?" she snapped. "People think we don't care about our own child." I laughed, short and bitter. "I care a lot about how things look," I said. "Not so much about me." My dad cut in, voice sharp. "You're still our responsibility. Come home, drop the art phase, we'll fix this." Something in me snapped clean. "No," I said. You taught me choices have consequences. Now it's your turn. I hung up, shaking, not from fear, but from the clarity of someone who finally chose themselves. As the competition got closer, professors lingered by my easel. One of the harshest critics in the department stared at the portrait for a long time before saying, "This makes me uncomfortable. That means it matters." Then my mom asked to meet. We sat in a quiet cafe, far from campus. She looked different, older, tired. "Your entry is online," she said. "Do you have any idea what this will do to us?" I sipped my coffee. "You mean your reputation?" Her jaw tightened. She admitted people at work were talking, that she'd been demoted. "Consequences," I said calmly. She finally whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd actually leave." Then she offered money, tuition, help, if I pulled the painting. The deal hung there like poison. "You're not trying to fix anything. You're trying to rewind me." I stood up. "I'm not pulling it." She warned me not to come back when it all fell apart. I almost laughed. There was nowhere to go back to. The competition venue was massive. White walls, high ceilings. My piece hung dead center. The morning of the opening, my father emailed threats of legal action. I forwarded it to my professor. The response came back fast. "Artistic expression is protected. We stand by our artists." For the first time, people with power were on my side. When the doors opened, the room filled fast. Critics, students, cameras. Then I saw my parents. Recognition hit them like a punch. My dad demanded I take it down. I said no. It's not slander, it's documentation. When they called my name for the grand prize, the applause felt unreal. Standing at the mic, I said what I'd carried for years. Sometimes survival means telling the truth so loudly it drowns out lies. I didn't look at my parents. I didn't need to. After the competition, the noise didn't fade the way I thought it would. It multiplied. A local news segment ran a short piece about the show, then another outlet picked it up. They called me the teenager who turned abandonment into art. My inbox filled with messages from people I'd never met. Some thanked me, some told me my work made them feel seen. A few told me I was brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt exposed, like I'd peeled my skin off in public and everyone was deciding what it meant. The grant money helped, but it didn't fix everything. Rent still loomed, classes still demanded more than I had left in me, and my parents didn't back off. They just changed tactics. Emails turned colder, more calculated. Relatives reached out repeating the same script, saying I was confused, sick, being manipulated. One cousin whispered the truth in a late-night text. My mom's workplace was buzzing. People had connected dots she'd spent years hiding. Her perfect story was cracking, and she was furious about it. Then came the email from my father. Short, sharp, legal language, accusations of defamation, threats of court. My stomach dropped until my professor read it and laughed quietly. "They don't have a case," she said. "Truth is inconvenient, not illegal." She forwarded it to the gallery's legal team. The reply came back fast and clean. "We support our artist. Stop contacting her." For the first time, someone drew a line I didn't have to defend alone. Work followed. Small exhibitions, panels, a workshop invite from another city. I traveled on buses with sketchbooks on my lap, sleeping in cheap rooms, living on coffee and adrenaline. Every place I showed, someone recognized themselves in the work. Kids from stripped homes, adults who'd been told their dreams were stupid. Survival has a universal language. I started to realize my parents weren't the center of this anymore. They were just part of the origin story. They noticed that shift too. The calls came back. Softer this time. Careful. My mother left voicemails asking to talk. My father emailed updates about family friends, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. Silence was the only boundary that worked. Instead, I painted. I poured everything into a new series.
Not about them directly, but about doors. Doors half open, doors sealed shut, doors glowing from the other side. Each one felt like a decision I'd survived. Months later, I heard about their lives without trying to. The internet has a way of delivering gossip whether you want it or not. My father's business was struggling. Clients stopped calling after the articles circulated. A bad investment finished the job. The house I grew up in went on the market, then sold. They moved into a small apartment far from the neighborhood they used to brag about. I didn't feel joy hearing that. I felt heavy. Consequences don't always feel like victory. Sometimes they just feel final. The first voicemail from my mother after all that was different. Smaller. Frayed. She said my father's health wasn't good, that bills were stacking up, that they could really use my help. I listened once, then I archived it and went back to my studio. I painted late into the night, pushing color across canvas until my arms burned. My feelings weren't clean anymore. They were tangled. Anger mixed with pity, strength mixed with grief for the kid I used to be. Years passed like that. Work, travel, teaching, growth. I signed with a gallery that understood my work wasn't decoration. It was testimony. Students wrote to me saying my paintings gave them courage to leave homes that were hurting them. That mattered more than sales ever could. I built my life piece by piece, without permission, without apology. Then, one ordinary afternoon, my phone lit up on the work table. 99 missed calls. Same number. The house line I'd blocked, unblocked, and muted over the years just so I could see it and choose. The words from that night echoed like a scratch in a record. "You'll be back begging in a month." I looked up at a newer painting on my wall, a phone glowing with missed calls, a figure standing at an open window facing the city instead of the noise behind her. I took a breath and let it ring once more before answering. The line clicked, then went quiet. I could hear breathing on the other end, uneven and scared. Hospital noise leaked through, monitors, an announcement echoing down a hallway. "Alex," my mom said finally, her voice raw and hoarse. I didn't rush her. I leaned against the table and waited, letting the silence do the work. "We've been trying to reach you," she added, like that explained anything. "I noticed," I said, keeping my tone flat. "What do you want?" There was a pause. Then my dad's voice slid in, thinner than I remembered. "We need help." He didn't dress it up. "Medical bills, debts. We're losing everything." A laugh tried to claw its way out of my chest before I could stop it. It came out short and sharp. "I lost everything at 16, I said. "You told me that would teach me something." He swallowed. "We were wrong," he said, dragging the words like they hurt to touch. "About your art, about how we treated you. Please, we're begging." The word hung there, heavy with irony. Begging. The echo of that night hit me hard. The door slamming, the streetlight buzzing, the promise they'd made so confidently. "You'll be back begging in a month." I didn't answer right away. Images stacked up fast. The police station, the shredded drawings, the cafe apology that came with conditions. Then newer images pushed in. My first solo show, a student crying after a workshop because they finally felt allowed to choose themselves. The letters from strangers who said my work gave them a spine. I walked to the window and stared at the city that had become mine. "I built this life without you," I said slowly. "Every canvas, every paycheck, every sleepless night. You weren't there. You were the reason I had to fight this hard." My mom's breath hitched. "We know. We're sorry, truly. Can we at least see you, talk, try to fix something?" My eyes burned, but I didn't let tears fall. "You want forgiveness now that everything else is gone," I murmured. "Would you have called if you still had the house and the image and the lie?" Silence answered louder than words. I could have hung up. Part of me wanted to. That part remembered every sentence word for word. Another part, smaller, stubborn, knew that carrying this forever would keep me tied to them in a way I'd already escaped. I took a breath. I'm not your safety net. I won't be your bank. I won't erase what you did. Their breathing sharpened. But, I continued, surprising myself, I won't watch you fall apart on principle. I'll have my lawyer contact the hospital, a payment plan, through a foundation, not my name. This isn't reconciliation. It's me choosing not to become what hurt me. My dad tried to speak. I cut him off gently. This doesn't buy forgiveness. That has to be earned over time, and you may never get all of it. On the other end, a sob broke loose. My mom, I think. Thank you, she whispered. I ended the call before it could turn into promises or bargaining. My hands shook as I set the phone down, but there was a strange lightness in my chest, like a sealed room finally getting air. I picked up a brush and went back to the painting of the glowing phone. In the reflection, I added one small detail I hadn't planned, a faint outline of a door in the distance. Not wide open, not slammed shut, just there, a possibility. Not a promise. I stepped back and felt the shift. I hadn't gone back begging. I hadn't won by crushing them. I'd chosen something harder. Outside, traffic hissed and the city kept moving. I cleaned my brushes, shut off the lights, and stood for a moment in the dark. Whatever came next wouldn't be dictated by fear or money or their expectations. It would be dictated by the life I'd already proven I could build. I locked the studio and walked into the night, steady, carrying the weight of the past without letting it steer me. The weeks after that call felt quieter, but not empty. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm finally moves on, leaving debris you still have to sort through. My lawyer handled the hospital paperwork. I didn't read the details. I didn't want to. Distance was part of the boundary. I kept painting, teaching, traveling when the work called for it. People asked if I felt relieved. I didn't have a clean answer. Relief isn't a switch. It's a slow leak. Time did what it always does. It kept going. My work matured in ways I hadn't planned. The anger didn't vanish, but it stopped driving. It became fuel instead of fire. I started a new series that critics later called Restrained, which made me laugh. They mistook control for calm. Each piece carried echoes, doors, thresholds, figures choosing direction without asking permission. Students noticed the shift before I did. It feels steadier, one said, like you know where you're standing now. Maybe that was true. I heard updates about my parents through the same back channels as before. Health stabilized, debts reorganized. Nothing miraculous, no redemption arc wrapped in a bow. They tried to call again, carefully spaced, respectful. I let some go to voicemail. I answered one months later, kept it brief. No fights, no apologies rehearsed to impress an audience. Just logistics. Boundaries held. That mattered more than words. At a small exhibition in another city, a woman waited until the crowd thinned. She was older than me by decades, hands shaking as she spoke. "Your work," she said, tapping the frame lightly, "gave me the courage to leave." She didn't explain more. She didn't have to. Moments like that recalibrate everything. They remind you why telling the truth was worth the cost. Not because it punishes anyone, but because it opens exits you didn't know existed. On a late flight home, I flipped through photos on my phone and stopped on one from years back. The cracked sidewalk, the backpack, the sketchbook pressed to my chest. I remembered the vow I made under that streetlight. I would rather starve than crawl back. I hadn't starved. I hadn't crawled. I'd built something sturdier than defiance. I'd built choice. The studio became my anchor. Same window, same table, new canvases leaning like questions waiting to be answered. One afternoon, I took down the painting of the glowing phone. I didn't destroy it. I didn't hide it. I archived it, slid it into storage with the others that marked turning points. History matters. It just doesn't get to run the show forever. A message came in from a former classmate, now a curator, asking if I'd consider a retrospective of early work paired with the newer pieces. The through line is powerful, she wrote. It shows growth without erasure. I agreed. When the exhibit went up, I walked the room alone before opening night. From the raw early canvases to the steadier recent ones, the story was clear. Not neat, not gentle, honest. Standing there, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. Not because I'd forgiven everything, and not because I was still angry enough to withhold it. I just didn't need it to move forward. The life I'd built didn't hinge on their words. It hinged on my choices, repeated daily. On my way out, I caught my reflection in the glass. Older, steadier, carrying myself differently. I thought about the question that had followed me since 16, the one that kept me awake in borrowed beds and tiny rooms. Would you still choose yourself if it meant being alone? The answer was no longer hypothetical. I had chosen myself, over and over. And in doing so, I'd found connection that wasn't conditional. I locked the studio, stepped into the evening hum, and felt the familiar city rise to meet me. Whatever came next, contact, silence, repair, distance, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. The door I'd walked through years ago wasn't a dead end. It was an entrance. And I was done explaining why I deserved to be there. I stood by the window of my studio, watching the city glow the way it only does when you've earned your place in it. Here's the truth, I said quietly. I built this life without you. Every late night, every scraped dollar, every moment I kept going when it would have been easier to quit. You weren't there. You were the reason I had to push this hard just to survive. On the other end of the line, my mother's breathing shook. "We know," she whispered. "We're sorry, really. Can we just see you? Talk? Try to make things right?" My eyes burned, but I kept my voice steady. "You want forgiveness now that everything's gone," I thought. Would you have called if the house was still big, the image still clean, the lie still working? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. I could have ended the call right there. Let them sit with the fallout they created. Part of me wanted to. That part remembered every slammed door, every cruel word, every time I was told I'd fail without them. But another part, quieter and stubborn, knew that carrying all that anger forever would keep me tied to them in ways I'd already escaped. I took a slow breath. "I'm not your backup plan," I said. "I won't be your bank. I won't pretend the past didn't happen." Their breath caught, but I wasn't finished. I also won't turn into someone who lets people suffer just to prove a point. I'll help with the hospital bills. Through lawyers, through a foundation, not my name. This isn't forgiveness. That takes time, and you may never fully earn it. But you also won't be left out in the cold because of me. My father tried to speak. I stopped him gently. This isn't a reunion. This isn't starting over. This is me choosing not to be cruel, even when I have every reason to be. On the line, there was a broken sob. My mom, I think. "Thank you," she said. I ended the call before it turned into promises or guilt. My hands were shaking when I set the phone down, but my chest felt lighter, like air finally got into a room that had been locked for years. I walked back to the canvas with the glowing phone and picked up my brush. In the reflection, I added one small detail I hadn't planned. A door in the distance. Not wide open, not slammed shut. Just there. A choice. Because that was the truth. I didn't come back begging. 11 years later, they were the ones asking. And I answered, but on my terms. So now I'll leave you with the question that's followed me since I was 16. If the people who pushed you out, who watched you struggle and called it tough love, showed up years later with nothing but regret and empty hands, What would you do? Would you open the door, or would you let them stand outside and finally feel the cold they once shoved you into?